Welcome to the Primetime Podcast, everybody, hosted here on the MEG Nick YouTube channel. My name is Nick, and I hope you guys are doing well whenever you are checking out the latest episode of the podcast here. This is episode number 16 for you guys, and today we're actually going back to do something that we did previously in the podcast here. You guys may remember a few episodes back, we did something that I like to call the mini TV tournament here. I gathered up a bunch of fantastic sitcoms here that we don't often get a chance to talk about on the show, and threw them together in a mini tournament here using RNG, picking out two at a time and battling it out to see which of them was the best of the batch. And it's very similar to what we do on the channel with the main TV tournaments that I do with Mike and Matt every once in a while. And it's just a great way to have just a mini competition here and talk about some shows that often get neglected. And we're going to do something like that very similar today, but instead of doing it with sitcoms, we are going to use shows from the 2021 to 2022 TV season. This is obviously something that we've been talking about quite a bit here on the show throughout the run, as it started with us looking at the schedule. And so far, there have been about 20 or so different shows that have premiered that I think are eligible for this. So I gathered them all up and then using RNG here, selected 16 of them for today's competition. As we look at the shows that we have available to us today, you can see a nice variety of stuff. We have some dramas here, we have some sitcoms here. All of these I've seen a little bit of, at least so I can judge for today's competition. And we're just going to go through these, give my thoughts on them, and then as we go through, obviously eliminate the ones that I'm not as big on, keep the ones that I am, and we will slowly but surely narrow it down to my all-time favorite of these for this year. Now, of course, there are more than this that have debuted. I haven't seen every single show so far that has come out during the season, but these 16 I definitely have, and I have some thoughts on these, whether good or bad here, and I'd love to know yours as well in the comments. With that in mind, let's get this underway here. We have our RNG over here to the left, so we're going to start off picking two at random here. We have number 16 and we have number 13 here. So it looks like our first two shows up for today are going to be Promised Land and The Wonder Years 2021 here. Now, in my opinion, both of these, unfortunately, not the best shows to start off this competition. I'm definitely not as big on either one of these as I am some of the other shows on this list here, but let's talk about them anyway. With The Wonder Years 2021, I'll do this very briefly because in the previous episode I actually went through and give a pretty big synopsis on this and kind of went in depth on this show. But essentially the short version of that is this is just a show that I don't think is very relevant to me personally. I could definitely see why someone would enjoy this one, why it would be very insightful and, very, it would speak to them in a way if they were able to relate to something like this. But I just am not able to do that, unlike the original Wonder Years, which is, I think, way more universal, way more relatable, just has sort of themes that everyone, regardless of who they are, where they came from, can relate to. This one is a lot more specific. It's obviously targeting a African-American demographic, and it's going to have storylines and plot lines that really, for them, are going to be very, insightful and impactful. It's going to definitely speak to them in a way that most shows are not able to, which is a good and a bad thing depending on how you look at it. But the other main problem with this show is it is marketed, after all, as a comedy, and I just don't think it's very funny. That's the other main issue with it. Regardless of the storylines, regardless of its demographic, comedy is the most universal form of art and of TV there is, and this show just does not make me laugh, and that's obviously a problem when considering that it is a sitcom at the end of the day. Looking at Promised Land by comparison here, this one is definitely more of a drama here, almost a bit of a soap opera to some degree here. Follows the lives of the main character named Joe and his journey from immigrating to the United States when he was a teenager from Mexico, and then starting up this, he buys this vineyard and he starts this winery. And in the pilot episode, we kind of see the back and forth. It kind of flashes back to when he was immigrating and when he's trying to, make a better life for himself and his family by coming to the United States. And then we see the present day Joe as this kind of CEO and this big shot of this winery here. And the soap opera elements kind of come into it in the form that everyone around him wants to take over the business, right? He has his ex, some of his kids, his family is kind of fed up with the way he does things. And he's, he's this big shot here and has all the power and all the money and stuff. And they kind of want to take over his business here and get a piece of that. And it's kind of marketed as this, very intense, like kind of cheesy soap opera type of show. And again, this one just did not really work for me whatsoever. This is the kind of show that I'm just not really big on either. Soap operas are kind of hit or miss for me usually. It depends on how they're kind of put together, if you will. It really depends on just the basic storyline with most of these, but this one here just about a vineyard, it's not really that interesting of an idea here. So of these two, I'm actually going to give it, believe it or not, to The Wonder Years here. I think even though I'm not really a fan of it, I think I would rather watch it than Promised Land here, because this one I thought was way more dull. So we are going to take out Promised Land here. It's the first one eliminated. Let's get that out of here. And The Wonder Years, for now, is going to remain. Not sure how long it's going to stay in the competition, but for now it's good. Let's break this down to 15 here, and we'll get our next two shows, number 5 and number 1 here. So those two are the 4400, great sci-fi sort of mystery show, and then we also have The Cleaning Lady here, a very interesting crime drama. So let's put those together there. We'll start off with The Cleaning Lady here. Now this one as well, I've talked about previously on the podcast. This is a crime drama that essentially follows the life of this sort of custodial worker. That's our main protagonist on this show. And she works for this company that kind of does these catering events. She'll work at weddings or birthday parties, stuff like that, and then she'll stay afterwards. And she's one of the women that help clean up afterwards, hence the title. And one day when she's leaving one of these events that she's working for, she witnesses a murder go down. And if you know anything about murders or being in the mob or anything, you know that you can't leave any witnesses when you take part in these sort of murders and all these crimes. So she gets caught and she pleads for her life, of course, because she doesn't want to get caught up in the mob scene, and agrees that she will help clean up the evidence, right? She starts cleaning up all the blood and gets rid of the body and stuff, and agrees with these mobsters that if she will, do that for them whenever they need this murder get, taken for... She agrees with these mobsters that if she helps, clean up this evidence and stuff and follows them around to assist them in that, then they won't kill her, first of all, but they will also give her, some money because she is also struggling financially to support her child who has this life-threatening illness. So there's a lot of layers to this show, and I think for the most part, it works if that's what you're looking for. If you want a really good crime drama, if you like anti-hero storylines, this is something that you are going to definitely enjoy. For me personally, again, it's not really a genre that I'm super into. I think it's just kind of oversaturated now with these types of shows. There's a lot of them out there, and they all just kind of feel the same, at least to me. But again, this is something that I think most people, if you are into that style, could definitely get into. Comparably to the 4400, this is a very interesting idea. This one, a remake of the 2004 series of the same name here. Kind of has that mystery sci-fi element, like I said earlier. This one about just a group of people who suddenly get transported to this mysterious area, and we don't know where they came from, we don't know who they are exactly. 4,400 of them, and they just kind of come out of nowhere, right? We just see them get taken away just out of the daylight and get transported to this mysterious area. And the overall sort of mystery here is why all these people specifically, because they don't seem to have any connection with one another. We see some from, they get transported out of like 2005, like the main character does. We have some that come out of the 50s. We have some come out of the 1800s, all different time periods, all different eras, all different types of people as well here. So we're just not really sure why all of that is happening there. And in the very first episode, it doesn't really do the best job at just hooking you in. That was my main problem with it, was that there just wasn't enough, substance here to really latch onto. It has a decent premise at least, and I think in some cases it does work well enough in trying to pay homage to the original without stepping on its toes, without being a complete rip-off of sorts. It does have its own identity to some degree, but there just isn't enough here, at least yet, to really, hook you in and really draw you into the story, was my big issue. So with this one as well, kind of a tough choice because, like I said, I'm not really the biggest fan of either of these either, but I understand why both of them could be very popular. I think I am going to go with the Cleaning Lady here as the winner for this round and take out the 4,400, though, just because I think that one is definitely one that I could get into a little bit more going further into the run of the show. So following that, we are down to 14 now. Let's keep on going, pick out another 2 for the next matchup here. They're going to be number 10 and number 12 here. So this time around, we have Our Kind of People and Queens here. Very interesting matchup. I actually really do like both of these shows. This is kind of the first time where we've seen shows that I actually enjoy matchup here. So we'll talk about these two. Starting with Our Kind of People here. This is definitely another sort of drama. Definitely has some soap opera type elements to it, but I think it's executed much better than Promised Land, as we saw earlier. This one about a young sort of entrepreneur who starts her own business and goes to California, travels there to kind of get part of this big company that's going to finance these small businesses and these entrepreneurs. But when she gets there, ends up realizing that they know more dirt on her than she initially suspected. They know her past, her childhood, some of the secrets that her family holds that kind of are a hindrance to her and her growth in this sort of industry there. Very, very interesting cast as well. I really like Morris Chestnut on the show. He is a TV legend after all, and he gives a really good performance here. But just kind of an interesting, again, mystery type of show there, led by some really, really good performances on this one. Not the most unique show ever, not the most original story ever, but one that's executed well enough that I was entertained throughout the first couple of episodes there. Comparable to Queens, this one is another really interesting drama here. This one's about a group of female musicians here, female rappers who back in the 90s were massive. They had a huge hit song back in the day, toured, did a bunch of music videos, everything like that. And it's kind of set both in the past and then in the present here as well, as it kind of flashes back between the two. So you see the contrast between them. Back in the 90s, they were a big deal and they were on top of the world. And 20 years later, in the present day, they all just have normal jobs, normal lives. They don't really see the rock star lifestyle anymore. They have kids now. They're all grown up. And it's very interesting to see the two, how they compare with one another. Of course, But one day they hear about this young upcoming rapper who covered their big hit back in the day. They end up hearing it on the radio, and that prompts them to kind of contact their manager and get back together as a group and start up the band again. And it's a really interesting concept. I think there's some really good performances in this as well from people like Eve is the lead here, who of course can do music and acting in the past. She's done several decent movies and TV shows, and then of course is a huge rapper as well there. So really, really smart casting on their part. This is just a very fun music, comedy, drama sort of thing. Kind of takes inspiration from a bunch of different genres there, and I think does that really, really well, and is going to be my winner here for this round. I did enjoy Our Kind of People, like I said, but I think Queens just has a little bit more of a unique premise there that I really enjoyed watching. So I'm going to take out Our Kind of People here, down to 13 more shows here. So far, a really great selection of shows we've gotten to discuss here. Let's continue it with number 2 and number 5 here. So this time around, we have American Auto here, a fantastic sitcom from this year, and FBI International, a fantastic drama as well here. Let's start off with American Auto here. This one premiering on NBC just a few months ago, back in December, when it had that special preview kind of as a way to market the show and sort of advertise it to a larger crowd, and then had its initial run start in January here, where it's been on TV since. And this is one of my favorite comedies of the entire season so far. Very, very fun, just sort of unique premise as well. Workplace comedy here about the lives of auto workers working at the fictional Payne Motor Company, set in Detroit, which makes sense because we are the Motor City after all, which is a really fun sort of setting to have a comedy. And I haven't really seen a lot of those in the past couple of years, and this is a great one to be set there, and makes sense because they are working at an auto shop, which is a really interesting idea. But yeah, the performances here are really, really great as well. Mostly with Anna Gasteyer, who you might know from SNL. They're an industry legend as the lead role, as the CEO of the company, who comes in and is a little bit naive to the whole situation, is kind of cocky at times, a little arrogant, but always has her heart in the right place. So kind of an interesting character there who I really enjoy. But yeah, this is definitely one that I recommend if you're looking for a really good comedy. If you like stuff like Parks and Rec or The Office, you like workplace comedies, I think you'll definitely enjoy this one all the same. Compare that to FBI International, which is the latest from Dick Wolf here, the latest in the FBI series, another fantastic series that's currently airing on CBS here. This one, pretty much your standard police procedural, right? Nothing super original, very by the books here, but again, executed very, very well. The very first episode, in fact, is a crossover with the original FBI. We see characters like OA and Jubal in the first episode of this series, which is really cool. If you're a fan of the other shows here, it's a great way to hook you in. And like I said, this one doesn't do anything that's, too interesting or too remarkable outside of just being a very standard police drama, but it does so in a very, very good way, in my opinion. And of course, you guys know that I love Dick Wolf as well, so this is a pretty tough choice which one I prefer overall. But if I had to pick one, I'm going to say American Auto here is going to be my winner. I'm going to take out FBI International for this round here. I do just generally prefer comedies overall to dramas here, so that is my reasoning for picking American Auto. Let's continue with this. We have 12 more to go. Our next matchup is going to be between number 3 and number 1 here. So for those two, we have Abbott Elementary and we have The Big Leap here. Another interesting matchup we have. Let's start off with Abbott Elementary here. This is another one that I am absolutely in love with right now. Definitely one that I highly recommend. Again, if you like great comedies this year, if you're looking for one, this is another fantastic one for you. And it's very similar, again, to something like Parks and Rec or The Office. kind of has that workplace feel to it. This one taking place in an elementary school and following the lives of the teachers that work there. Kind of a rundown elementary school in kind of this low-income area of Philadelphia, but a very, very funny setup as well there. Probably my favorite aspect to it are just the characters in particular. So many memorable ones here, even though it's only been on for a few months here already. Definitely some very, very standout characters. Gregory there, played by Tyler James Wilson. Gregory, especially played by Tyler James Williams, is absolutely hilarious. Definitely my favorite character of the show. He just has that great sort of those visual gags now, and those facial expressions. Absolutely a standout for the series there. And then the main character Janine as well is really, really solid. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like an Leslie Knope from Parks and Rec. Very optimistic, always willing to do her best and put her best foot forward, but a little naive at times, which makes her just a fun character to root for. A little bit of an underdog almost. You definitely want to see her succeed. She's just trying to do what she can to help her students and get the school as best as it can be, but sometimes just little hindrances that make that harder for her. So you definitely root for her. And then you have the principal as well of the school, Ava, who's another standout character. Definitely like the Michael Scott of this show. Just kind of, thinks for herself, kind of selfish almost. Definitely naive at times as well. And just a really, really funny character as well. Definitely reminds me a lot of Steve Carell on The Office there. So like I said, if you like any of those shows, if you like those sort of workplace mockumentaries, definitely check this one out. This one critically acclaimed as well for a reason. Now compare that to The Big Leap here, which is also critically acclaimed, but not by me. I am definitely not a fan of this one at all. It's not that I think it's like objectively bad. Like I can see why some people would enjoy this, but this to me is just not an entertaining story. This is just not something that I would choose to watch purely based on its genre that it's in. Because the whole plot of this one is about a group of just average everyday people that audition to be on this dance reality show. So think something like Dancing with the Stars or So You Think You Can Dance or a show like that. And that's just not a very interesting premise to me. I've never been a fan of those types of shows, never cared for watching any of those reality shows like that. And the idea of them, sort of parodying or satiring that genre just really isn't, anything that I would choose to watch, and having to watch the first episode for an upcoming project that I did, I was kind of dreading it, and I was not a fan of it at all. So this is a very easy decision. I'm going to take out The Big Leap here and go with Abbott Elementary as my victor here. We are down to 11 shows, so let's keep on going here. That to 11, and our next two are going to be number 6 and number 7 appropriately, which looks like it's going to be Naomi here and NCIS Hawaii. Really nice that we're knocking out all of these shows. We have not gotten a repeat yet, which is pretty awesome to see. Unlike the last time, we had a couple shows slip through to the top because we never selected them, but this time it looks like we're going through pretty much all of them at this point. But let's start off with Naomi here. This is a new superhero drama based on the character Naomi McDuffie from the DC Comics. And this one I really enjoyed. I'm not really a big superhero guy for the most part, but this one really, really solid stuff so far. I really like the main character here. She's very personable, just had a lot of charisma to her character, and I think that the actress that played her as well was really, really good, really, really a good fit for the character in question. Also saw some really interesting villains, perhaps. Not really villains, but we don't know exactly who some of these characters are, like D specifically. We're not really sure if he is a villain or maybe he is on Naomi's side, but very, very interesting character regardless. Definitely some mystery to it. And this show has a really interesting sort of concept behind it, which is the idea that it exists in the same universe as Superman, which is going to attract a lot of people because, of course, Superman is massive there. But Superman in this world exists as a character, as kind of like a myth. He's not really a main, figure in this universe, not like you would in his own or anything, but still has connections there. So there's a little bit of a mystery there as to how he plays into this world, if he is a hero to these people or if he is a villain to these people, which is a very interesting idea. Definitely not something you'd see in a traditional superhero show, and that's what makes it so interesting and so unique and refreshing in this kind of onset of just superhero shows and all these movies and stuff just piling on the industry right now. This is definitely a much more refreshing take on that genre, and personally I really enjoyed it. Compared that to NCIS Hawaii, which I think is just a very run-of-the-mill, cop drama again, kind of like FBI International, but just not as good in my opinion. Just a very, by the book, by the numbers sort of police procedural here. If you like the NCIS shows, then this is another one that's going to be right up your alley. It doesn't do anything different than any of those other ones, which could either be a good or a bad thing, depending on if you like those or not. But for me, I just was not a fan of these. I'm usually more into the Law and Order, Dick Wolf type of stuff, not really so much NCIS. So this one just didn't do anything new to hook me in and make me a fan of this series. It just didn't really have any standout moments to it. So this is a pretty easy choice. I'm going to take this one out and keep Naomi here as my victor for this matchup. We are down to our top 10. Let's keep on going here. We're just rolling through this today, and our next matchup is going to be between number 4 and number 2 here. Interesting. So we have American Auto once again, so we're going to see that go into its second round here, and we also are going to talk about the show Grand Crew here. Oops, I grabbed the wrong one there. So we have American Auto and Grand Crew here. So we already discussed American Auto here, so let's talk about Grand Crew for a little while. I was wondering if these two were actually going to match up, because these were pretty much premiered at the exact same time on the same channel there, NBC. They're actually like on the same day. They're back to back to one another, which is pretty interesting. But I can safely say that if I had to pick only one of them, it would definitely be American Auto here. Grand Crew, I've mentioned this in previous podcasts as well. This is just a very sort of bland, nothing too original sort of sitcom here that doesn't exactly rip off or copycat any existing shows, but treads that line very, very closely. It has a lot of very big similarities to shows like Friends or Will and Grace or How I Met Your Mother, about a group of 20-something-year-olds living in the big city, navigating their way through adulthood. That's pretty much the vague sort of synopsis I can put on this show. And again, there's nothing distinct or interesting about this one that you can't find in any other sitcom throughout the 2000s or the 90s, such as any of those that I just mentioned there. American Auto rather, also does similar things to those shows, but is not, trying to be exactly like them, unlike the way that Grand Crew is, in my opinion. So pretty easy decision there. I'm going to take out Grand Crew here, and we're going to keep American Auto here, which is currently going pretty far in this little mini tournament we have here. We have 9 shows left. Let's keep on going with our next matchup here, which is going to be between number 7 and number 4 here. So let's see what that gives us. We have La Brea here, which is a really interesting mystery show, another sci-fi type drama that premiered on NBC. And we have Queens once again, so we have some stiff competition there. Queens, of course, we just discussed this musical comedy drama with Eve as the lead, but we have not yet seen La Brea here, so let's talk about that. This one was actually something that I really wanted to check out for myself when I heard just how much sort of buzz this one was receiving online. This was a really big show when it came out. This was part of the fall schedule, and at first I was a little bit skeptical of this. It didn't really think that there was a lot here that I was going to be into. We didn't really know a lot of information on it. This was kind of a last minute show that they added to the schedule here. But overall, once it debuted, this became a really, really big hit. It was actually the #1 new show for a little while back in the fall. And it was the first show that premiered this year to secure its second season already, which is very, very exciting for it. So based on all that, definitely had to check this out and see what all the hype was about. And honestly, I think that this show could work. It could work if it gets some more just time. I think a season 2 is definitely needed, because from what I've seen so far, the first few episodes definitely were not the best. And a lot of that just comes down to the simple aspects like the writing or the acting on this show. Definitely were not the strongest that I've seen so far this year. Some of the actors in particular, I just think are very inexperienced and just very young, very new to the industry. A lot of them don't even have like IMDb pages or Wikipedia pages. And that inexperience is definitely showing through here with some of the scenes. But I think the core central mystery of the show and the central concept of the show definitely does have potential. So I'm curious to see where this goes in the next couple of years. If it remains, as big of a hit as it does, then this could definitely become, a very, very recognizable show in the next couple of seasons. But for now, I just don't really know if there's much here for me, just because of some of those qualities that it has. Just kind of the so-so acting and the so-so writing here just kind of drag this one down for me. The basic premise I didn't even mention. A giant sinkhole in the middle of LA opens up, and throughout this like chaos of everyone screaming and running for their lives so they don't get sucked into this, a few people end up going down there and are transported back in time to prehistoric times. They're still in Los Angeles, but they've traveled back like 85 million years or something with all these extinct creatures. They're out in the forest. There's all this, wildlife around them, and they just don't know what's going on, right? That's the mystery behind it. And back on, Earth, where we, the present day sort of timeline, there's a group of scientists and researchers trying to figure out how they can get down there safely and rescue everybody. They try sending a drone in. When it gets past this sort of barrier, it just disappears, right? They lose the signal. And then we see when we cut back to the prehistoric times, it's down there and it's like changed. There's no drones obviously back then. So it just changes to like a rock or something, something that you'd find, 85 million years ago. So any technology that goes through, it kind of transitions back to whatever it would be the equivalent to 85 million years, which is kind of an interesting twist on it. So like I said, there's definitely some potential there. There's definitely some intrigue there, especially if you like sci-fi shows in general. But for me, there's just some things that they need to tinker with a little bit. So there's some kinks that they need to flesh out here to make it, I think, a little bit more universal and a little bit more palatable for TV audiences. So for now, I'm going to say Queens is still my preferred of these two, but I could see La Brea getting a little stronger in the next couple of years there. So that knocks it down. We are now down to our final 8 here. Half the playing field is gone. And with that, let's do a quick recap here of what shows are left. We have Abbott Elementary, American Auto, The Cleaning Lady, Naomi, Pivoting, which we have not yet discussed, Queens, Women of the Movement, we have not yet discussed, and The Wonder Years 2021, which is definitely the weakest of these, but managed to slip by because there was probably only one show that it could have been weaker for, and that was Promised Land, which it matched up against. So with that, let's take a look at our next two. We have number 6 and number 1 here, which is going to be Abbott Elementary and Queens here. So Queens definitely getting its fair share of matchups here. And like I said, I like this show a lot, and I really like Abbott Elementary a lot. I think if anyone's listening out there that hasn't yet seen either one of these two shows, I think it's really going to depend on what genre you prefer. If you like more dramas, I think Queen is going to be for you. If you're generally more comedy like me, then it's going to be Abbott Elementary, because I think all the technical aspects of these, the acting, writing, directing, all that stuff, pretty much on par with one another. They're both critically acclaimed, both very, very popular so far in the season. But I'm going to say Abbott Elementary here as my vote, just because generally I do prefer comedies there. So Queen's really, really good run so far, but this is where it comes to an end here. Top 7 we have left here. Let's keep on rolling with this. Number 6 and number 4. So let's take a look at what we have there. We have Naomi there, and we have Women of the Movement here. So that's a new show that we haven't yet talked about. We'll talk about this one first here. This was a really, really interesting show as well here, based on the life of Emmett Till there. That was sort of the main central concept of the show, and everything that happens to him, and then how his family and his mother specifically responds to it all. It's a very, very sad story, one about racism and prejudice and discrimination and all those sort of central concepts that from stories of this, of this nature from back in the 50s and 60s when this takes place. And it does not shy away from that at all. There's definitely moments where it's very tense, and there's, moments of direct racism. They definitely use certain, vocabulary in the show that you would not expect on network TV. Definitely some violence on the show that can be, hard to watch at times. And there's definitely a lot of moments that do require sort of these, warnings that they give for this show, because it's going to be very sensitive to a lot of people. But at the same time, very, very good that a show like this is getting, national attention, because it's a story that I think deserves to be told. And they did it in a really, really great way here. This is another one that's critically acclaimed at the time, as it should be. And this is a very quick watch here. It was only on for 3 weeks, for 2 hours each week, so 6 hours total of TV. So about 6 hour-long episodes there. You could knock this out in half a day if you wanted to, and definitely recommend doing so. Easily one of my favorite miniseries that I've seen in quite a while here. This was a really, really well acted, well produced show that I think is going to touch on a lot of themes that are worth discussing here. Comparing that to Naomi, just a very fun, lighthearted show here. Definitely doesn't have those, deep themes that, you need to talk about nowadays, but just a very fun show to take your mind off of stuff like that, which is very, very interesting. Like I said, the superhero genre, they're kind of a little bit oversaturated now. This one definitely a much more refreshing take on it. But honestly, of these two, even though I do tend to avoid topics that are discussed in Women of the Movement, I think it's actually my preferred show here, just because it's very easy to just knock this one out. It'd be very easy to watch over a couple days, like I said, and definitely was on a technical level, the acting and the writing here was definitely up to its highest degree that it could be. Comparing that to Naomi, definitely some parts that were a little more cheesy and, not as serious there. And when you're looking at, the drama aspects of both, obviously you want that intensity, you want that sort of emotion to come through. And I think Women of the Movement definitely give you that much more directly. So that is going to be my vote there. I'm going to say Naomi is going to come to an end here, but it definitely had a good run in this tournament here. Down to 6 more shows here. Let's keep on going. Let's see if we can get Pivoting as one of them. Number 5 and number 2. And for those, we have American Auto and Women of the Movement here. So we have a very intense miniseries drama set in the 1950s, and a very lighthearted, breezy sitcom set in the modern day world. And once again here, you guys know sitcoms are more my bread and butter. I'm going to give this one to American Auto here over Women of the Movement. I definitely recommend this show, but at the end of the day, comedy is usually going to prevail for me, and American Auto is one of my favorite in the genre that I've seen all year. So Women of the Movement, unfortunately, going to have its run end here, just narrowly missing our top 5, which comes down to these. Abbott Elementary, American Auto, The Cleaning Lady, Pivoting, and The Wonder Years 2021. Let's see what we have next up here as our next matchup here. Number 4 and number 2 here. So those are going to be Pivoting. Finally, we see that one, and American Auto. So American Auto definitely getting its dues here for the matchups. Let's talk about Pivoting here for a minute. This is the last show that we have to discuss that we haven't yet seen in this tournament. And this one, honestly, this is another one that I think has some potential, but I think was just kind of rushed out. That's kind of the vibe I get here, is that they just needed some filler. They needed something to put on the schedule to, fill up the time for, and they just kind of rushed this one out without really giving it a lot of thought here. The main plot with this one are 3 friends who have been, closely knit for a very, very long time, and their 4th friend, who in the first episode passes away. That's not a spoiler because it's like the very first scene. They're at their funeral. So, these 4 friends formerly, one of them dies here, and the other 3 are just in mourn, of course, because they're a closely knit group. They've been lifelong friends for a very, very long time there. And so when that tragic event happens, it kind of they kind of look at their lives and they see, what are we doing that's good and what are we doing that can be improved on, right? And they're going to try to pivot, hence the name, some of their lives to make them all better for themselves. One of them, played by Maggie Q, her character is stuck in this rut of a job that she's constantly getting overwhelmed and stressed about, so she ends up quitting, and she ends up deciding, hey, instead of being a nurse and helping people and being a very profound profession that I have here, I'm going to quit that and work at a grocery store. That's what her character decides. And I can tell you right now, someone that does work at a grocery store, all of that stress and everything is going to come right back to you. So let's see how that works out. The other one has kids, and she is, she's a TV reporter, so she's usually not at home, and she's very affluent, and she doesn't really spend time with her kids all that much. But once this, her other friend dies, she decides, hey, I'm going to start spending time with my kids all of a sudden, instead of letting the maid do everything. Just such a dumb idea. And then the other one here has kids that are grown up, but she does not have a husband or any sort of relationship, and her sort of pivot is that she's going to enter the dating scene again. So that's kind of the central core, sort of the characters there and kind of what they go through in the first episode of the show. And again, this just seems like something that maybe had some potential. The cast itself have all done huge shows in the past. They've all done, they've all been big names in TV for quite a while here. But the sort of problem with this show is that it just doesn't feel like they put enough thought into how all of that was going to play out, and how each of those individual, storylines was going to, meld together to come to something, more conclusive there. They all feel like they could be, interesting enough on their own, but they don't really work together, if that makes sense. So, I don't know, this one just kind of a mess of a show, honestly. Not really something that I will be watching anytime soon, and definitely not over American Auto. No way. I would much rather watch that than this one here. Just kind of filler. That's the best way I could describe this. Just kind of filler for the schedule there. So glad to take that one out there, as we are down to our top 4 here. Somehow inexplicably, the Wonder Years got up there, despite being the first one we talked about. So let's see what our next one is, if we can knock that one out. There it is, number 4 there, going up against number 3 there, which is The Cleaning Lady. So of these two, since we already discussed them, no need to reiterate here. I'm going to say The Wonder Years here is definitely going to come out. Like I said, I respect this show. I do respect this show, but it's just not really something that I personally would choose to watch anytime soon. Just not something that I would really want to, engage with all that much. Just not really that relatable to me. Not very funny, like I said. So just all those kind of red flags about it that even if it was targeting a certain demographic, even if it was trying to, to market itself towards a certain group of people, should still be somewhat universal, should be somewhat funny, and it just doesn't hit those qualities at all. So that's kind of my big issue with it. But like I said, I do respect it. If you are a fan of it, that's awesome, but I'm just not personally. So we're going to take that one out. We're going to keep the cleaning lady in just for a second here as we are down to our top 3. Let me know in the comments which one you think is going to take it here as we narrow it down. Top 3 in progress here. So number 3 there for the cleaning lady is one. Give us something other, please. Why does it just want to keep doing it at number 3? There we go. Number 2. Finally, we got like 3 like all in a row. So that is going to be between the cleaning lady and American Auto there. And as you could probably guess by now, the cleaning lady is the one that I am going to eliminate here. American Auto and Abbott Elementary are my 2 favorite sitcoms from this year. So definitely want to see those go head to head in the finale there. The cleaning lady, unfortunately, this is where its run ends. So that leaves us with these top 2. And these are 2 that throughout this whole competition, I have been praising left and right. Absolutely awesome shows here that if you like comedy, if you want a good workplace comedy, these are 2 that you absolutely have to check out. There are no ifs, ands, or buts. Have to watch these 2. But if I had to pick one to say is my personal favorite of the entire season thus far, I'm going to go with the show that I am putting so much stock in that I think is going to go so far even further past just the 2021 season, go completely beyond what we expected of it based on its advertising, based on its marketing there. Absolutely blew everyone away with its critical reception and its popularity. And that show, my friends, is going to be Abbott Elementary here. I genuinely do think that this is the kind of show that can go on for like 10 seasons if it wanted. I really do think that, just like The Office or just like, tons of other great sitcoms out there, there's just so much potential here. There's so much, identity with this show. Like I said, it already is carving out so many iconic characters for itself, even though it's only been on for a couple of months there, which is super impressive, all things considered there. And I think in general, people are just responding to this show so much more than they are with American Auto. As much as I love American Auto, it just doesn't really have the same response or the same sort of audience as Abbott is currently having. Just absolutely a ratings juggernaut right now, which is awesome to see. This is definitely a show that, like I said, if you like comedy at all, is a must watch in my opinion. So that concludes it, my friends. American Auto, they're coming to its end of its run here and leaving Abbott Elementary as the victor in the mini TV tournament when it comes to the 2021 to 2022 TV debuts there. I hope you guys did enjoy this episode of the podcast there. Let me know, of course, what you thought of this one in the comments there. What are some of your favorite shows from the season? Are there any that I missed by chance? Because like I said, didn't have a chance to include all of them there. I know there were a couple big ones that I left off there, but again, we only have 16 slots there, so I wanted to give us a nice variety here. But if there's anything else that you guys saw, let me know in the comments as well. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for watching, everyone. We will see you in the next one.